Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll get you top stories from India and the region. I am Tanvi Taneja, and for news from the rest of the world, I am joined by my colleague in Washington, D.C., Caroline Malone. Caroline, good evening from New Delhi.
Well, good morning, Tanvi. It's 9 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. and 3 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, we will be live in Washington for more on the U.S. retaliatory strikes on Iranian groups in Iraq and Syria. But first, the headlines.
Indian Navy foils another piracy attempt along the east coast of Somalia, rescues 11 Iranian and 8 Pakistani crew along with the Iranian vessel. Prime Minister Narendra Modi addresses Bharat Mobility Global Expo 2024 in New Delhi, says India is the world's third largest market in passenger vehicles and the country's middle class is driving the sector. Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi says his country won't start a war but will respond to bullies. His reaction comes after the US hinted retaliation after 3 US soldiers were killed in Jordan. And EU and Asian leaders would seek to boost trade and strengthen regional security in the Indo-Pacific region at the 24th ASEAN-EU ministerial meet in Brussels today. In a swift response, the Indian Navy foiled another piracy attempt along the east coast of Somalia. Information regarding this piracy attempt on fishing vessel FV Omari was monitored on 31st January 2024. Indian Naval RPA, undertaking surveillance in the area, successfully located the fishing vessel Omari. An INS Sharda, deployed for anti-piracy mission in the region, was diverted to intercept the boat. An Iranian vessel, FV Omari, had been boarded by 7 pirates who had taken the crew as hostages. INS Sharda intercepted the vessel in early hours on Friday and used integral halo and boats to force the pirates for safe release of 11 Iranian and 8 Pakistani nationals along with the boat. The ship also undertook confirmatory boarding on fishing vessel Omari to check on the well-being of the crew. And DD India's Akshay Dongre joins us live now on the story. Akshay, this is the 4th such rescue attempt by the Indian Navy in a matter of just days. How should we be seeing this?
Well, absolutely, Tanvi. In fact, this is the 4th incident where the Indian Navy swift action has foiled attempts of hijacking of ships in the region. More surprising is the fact that these kind of piracy attempts have increased in the backdrop of the Red Sea attacks that have been carried out continuously by the Houthi militants. And now what we are seeing is a resurgence of the Somali pirates trying to hijack ships and trying to, in fact, exploit this turmoil that has erupted in the region. This is the 4th attempt. Earlier as well, Pakistani nationals were rescued. Now this time as well, 8 Pakistani and 11 Iranian nationals have been rescued. So this shows the kind of operation preparedness that has been deployed by the Indian Navy in the particular region, be it the Persian Gulf or the Gulf of Aden or the Arabian Sea. So what we are seeing is challenging times ahead as far as these kind of attempts that are increasing in intensity are concerned. And similarly, the Indian Navy is making preparedness to combat any such attempts, be it the Indian vessels or the one that we saw today, flagged vessel Omari, which was an Iranian flagged vessel in the region.
Yes, indeed, challenging times ahead for seafarers operating in the region. A word on the commitment of the Indian Navy in ensuring maritime security?
Well, from these last 4 incidents of anti-hijacking operation that have been carried out by the commandos of the Indian Navy, along with all the assets that have been pressed into the region, what we can see is that Indian Navy is also appropriately acting against these kind of attempts of hijacking attacks that have been carried out against the merchant vessels along with flagged vessels. We have seen that the Indian Navy has deployed frigates along with destroyers in the region for anti-piracy operations, along with the operations to rescue people whenever there has been need or whenever there has been help sought internationally. Indian Navy has been swift in acting, and similar kind of assets will continue to be deployed as far as the threat is concerned till it remains to threaten the vessels that in fact take this particular route.
Thank you, Akshay, for those updates. On to Brussels now, where the 24th ASEAN-EU ministerial meeting is slated in a few hours from now. The EU's top diplomat will host foreign ministers of the ASEAN grouping as well as from the Pacific Islands in 2 separate meetings. Boosting trade and regional security in the Indo-Pacific region will be at the top of the agenda when European and Asian leaders meet on Friday. DD India's Ishan Garg tells us more about what to expect from Brussels.
Hosting such a large delegation from Asia is a rare occurrence in Brussels. European Union officials say hosting the ASEAN and the Pacific Island nations at the same time shows the bloc's commitment towards the Indo-Pacific region. Leaders from the East Coast of Africa to the Pacific Islands are expected to attend the EU-Indo-Pacific ministerial meeting, while the EU-ASEAN summit will include the foreign ministers of Brunei, Myanmar, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand and Vietnam. EU officials say they believe the Asian century has begun, and engaging with players in the Indo-Pacific region has become crucial for trade and defense purposes. The EU and ASEAN have been trying to get a free trade agreement over the line for the past decade. Analysts say both blocs are looking to reduce their dependence on the Chinese economy and could now be closer to a deal finally. Officials say the bulk of the conversation between EU officials and leaders from ASEAN and the Indo-Pacific is going to focus on growing trade and investment in the region. The leaders will also assess common security issues. Those could include China's alleged aggression in the South China Sea and political tensions in Taiwan. EU officials told us that the bloc is hoping to pitch itself as a reliable defense partner with no hidden agendas. The meetings are also likely to focus extensively on climate change and transitioning to green energy. Pacific Islands and some of the ASEAN nations are among the countries likely to be most impacted by climate change, and Europe says it has the experience and technical expertise which can help these countries prepare better. Ishan Garg in Brussels, reporting for DD India.
Now, Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi has said that his country won't start a war but will respond to bullies. His comments come after the US hinted hitting at Iranian-backed Houthis with increased intensity after 3 US soldiers were killed in Jordan. My colleague Caroline Malone is in Washington, D.C. She gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Caroline, give us more on the US's plans.
Well, the US has approved plans for a series of strikes on Iranian targets in Syria and Iraq. It comes after a drone attack killed 3 US soldiers in Jordan, close to the Syrian border, on Sunday. The US blames an Iranian-backed group for the attack. The Islamic resistance in Iraq is believed to contain multiple militias that have been armed, funded and trained by Iran's Revolutionary Guards Force. Iran, meanwhile, has denied any role in the attack, which injured 41 other US troops at the military base known as Tower 22. President Ibrahim Raisi has said that his country would not start a war, however, it would respond strongly to anyone who tries to bully it. Well, the US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has said that this was a dangerous moment, but the United States would work to avoid a wider conflict.
So this is a dangerous moment in the Middle East. We will continue to work to avoid a wider conflict in the region, but we will take all necessary actions to defend the United States our interests, and our people. And we will respond when we choose, where we choose, and how we choose.
Well, we can go live now to DD India correspondent Nick Harper, who's standing by for us in Washington, D.C. So, Nick, do we have any more indication of what exactly the US is planning?
Morning, Caroline. Yes, we have some of those details. Lloyd Austin there talking about when the US chooses. It could be in the next couple of days. Where, he mentioned, it looks like it's going to be Iraq and Syria. Plans have been approved to target locations in both of those countries. Now, the US isn't saying exactly when it will happen, but there is some thinking that it could come as soon as this weekend. We're told that much of it depends on the weather conditions within the region. We're also told that this is likely to be a tiered response, so it could take place over several days and could include a range of different options, from airstrikes to other manoeuvres within the region. But we also know that Iran has been telling top commanders within those two countries to move away from potential targets, in theory to try and limit high-profile killings that then may prompt a response or need a response from Tehran. It could also come in combination with Washington carrying out some back-channel messaging with Tehran, essentially urging them not to respond to these strikes from the United States. But we've already seen some limited action in the region. The US striking in Yemen on Thursday, in particular targeting UAV facilities that are run by the Iran-backed Houthi militia there, and also some ground control stations as well within the country.
And Nick, what about the wider region? Is there any risk of this escalating conflicts any further?
Well, there certainly is. I mean, that's the big fear here, that whatever the US does then leads to a response from another country like Iran, and this cycle of strike, counter-strike just continues, with the potential to widen this conflict, to escalate it even further. But from a US point of view, Washington is saying, look, a response is needed. US service members have been killed for the first time since October the 7th, and therefore that demands action. But at the same time, messaging from the president, also the defense secretary, all saying that they are not seeking wider conflict in the region, but they do want to respond directly to what took place in Jordan with the killing of these 3 service personnel. Lloyd Austin saying that people must be held accountable, but without escalating the conflict. But that is the underlying fear, that whatever the United States does will only widen the conflict, potentially even opening another front within Syria, within Iraq, if those are the locations that the US goes ahead and carries out airstrikes on.
Thank you, Nick. That was Nick Harper reporting live from Washington, D.C. Well, moving on now to updates on the Israel-Hamas conflict. The Israeli Defense Forces are continuing to fight Hamas in Gaza. The IDF has released a video of its operation in Khan Yunis. In response to the barrage of rockets fired at central Israel on Thursday, the Israeli Air Force fighter jets struck the launchers used to fire the rockets. They've also destroyed 70 tunnel shafts harbouring Hamas. The IDF says multiple Hamas fighters have been killed in an Israeli aircraft strike and during combat on the ground. The forces also located large quantities of weapons. Well, meanwhile, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said that the country's troops have killed 10,000 Hamas fighters in Gaza since the start of the conflict.
To continue, not to stop it, requires national resilience and determination, and we must preserve until we complete our missions. And it is more difficult for Hamas. Believe me, they don't have weapons, they don't have ammunition. They have 10,000 eliminated terrorists and another 10,000 terrorists who are wounded and not functioning. This is a serious blow that erodes their abilities.
Well, on to the US campaign season now, and Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley on Thursday urged supporters in South Carolina to vote in the upcoming primary. Speaking at a campaign event, Haley said her rival Donald Trump would be unable to defeat US President Joe Biden and win back the White House. Fighting for survival in the Republican presidential race, the former South Carolina governor is casting Trump and Democratic President Biden as, quote, grumpy old men who are way past their prime. Meanwhile, a new Washington Post Monmouth University poll shows Trump leading Haley by 58% to 32% among potential Republican primary voters in South Carolina.
We have a choice to make. 70% of Americans have told us they don't want a Trump-Biden rematch. The majority of Americans disapprove of Donald Trump. The majority of Americans disapprove of Joe Biden. Both of those presidents put us trillions of dollars in debt that our kids are never going to forgive them for. And do we really want to go forward with a country in disarray and a world on fire with two candidates in their 80s? We need someone who can go 8 years hard and make sure we get things back on track.
Well, bipartisan negotiators in the US Senate have an agreement to curb the flow of migrants across the US-Mexico border. But the legislation still faces opposition from Republicans backing former US President Trump, also the frontrunner for that party's presidential nomination. Well, Trump has called on lawmakers to reject any deal ahead of the November elections that will determine control of the White House and Congress. Well, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban on Friday said that he went to the wall for his country before agreeing to the European Union new aid for Ukraine.
I had gone to the wall, so I can say that if this deal had not been reached and Hungary would have continued to use its right of veto, then 26 member states would have agreed to send the money to Ukraine, which I could not prevent, and would have taken away the funds earmarked for Hungary and sent that to Ukraine as well. In the end, we found a solution, an agreement, a good agreement. We are not sending weapons to Ukraine. We get our money from Brussels, and we will contribute to the civil financing of Ukraine.
Well, Orban's remarks came a day after leaders of the European Union unanimously voted in favour of extending 50 billion euros in financial assistance for Ukraine, a decision that was welcomed by Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. The crucial funding was stalled last year when the Hungarian Prime Minister Orban blocked its passage at an EU summit in December. Zelensky said the EU's support will help strengthen the long-term economic and financial stability of Ukraine.
I'm grateful for your decision on the financial instrument for us, for our people, for Ukraine. Ukraine facility with 50 billion euros. For a 4-year period. This is a clear signal that Ukraine will withstand and that Europe will withstand. It is also really important that this decision was taken unanimously by all of you, all 27 member states, and it is yet another clear sign of your strong unity and support of Ukraine.
Well, after the deal, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that Europe stands united and is well equipped for the challenges ahead.
The European Council reconfirmed Europe's unwavering commitment to stand with Ukraine. We all know that Ukraine is fighting for us, so we will support them with the necessary funding and provide them with the much-needed predictability they deserve.
Well, Russia has said that it is advancing its troops in Ukraine, as per Defence Minister Sergei Shoigu in video footage that was released on Friday. Shoigu was seen making remarks at a meeting of a top country's defence ministry officials and military commanders. Moscow says its forces have regained ground in many areas after a failed Ukrainian counteroffensive, taking control of the settlements in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region and other settlements in the country's Kharkiv region.
After the failure of enemy's counteroffensive, the Russian armed forces retained the strategic initiative along the entire line of combat contact. Our units are moving forward, expanding their control zones and improving their position along the front line. During active operations in the Kupiansk, Krasnolimansk and Donetsk directions, the settlement of Vesel, Krokmalne and Tabaivka were liberated.
Well, the United Nations highest court, the International Court of Justice, will decide on Friday whether to hear Ukraine's case against Russia. It accuses Russia of violating international law by using a false accusation of genocide as a pretext for its 2022 invasion. Over 24 European states have backed Kyiv by giving formal statements to the court. They believe the case should move forward. The court issued emergency measures in March 2022, ordering Russia to immediately halt its military operations in Ukraine. While the court's rulings are final and legally binding, it has no way to enforce them, and Russia has largely ignored the orders. Moscow said Ukraine is using the case as a roundabout way to get a ruling on the overall legality of Russia's military actions. Well, that's it from me here in Washington, D.C. Back to you in the studio, Tanvi.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Caroline Malone joining us all from Washington, D.C. You're watching DD India Global, still to come on the show. North Korea fires multiple cruise missiles off its west coast. South Korea notes it is the fourth such incident in just over a week. And to promote the Indian tradition of its handloom and handicrafts, 37th Suraj Kund International Crafts Fair begins in Haryana's Faridabad.
Our modern industrialized world is producing more toxins than ever before. Water quality across several parts of the world is getting worse.
We need to have these wastewater treatment plants.
Government is carving out localities here and there and releasing all the sewage water into these lakes.
When we analyze all this, the food, constituents of the food, had heavy metal.
With biotanks, the sewage water gets recycled. It can be used for different purposes or drained into the ground.
Shipwrecks are a major problem, and airtight international rules are needed to make a difference.
To 10% of a giant ship's weight is made up of asbestos, heavy metals, oil and other toxic substances.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. On to New Delhi now, addressing the Bharat Mobility Global Expo 2024 at New Delhi's Bharat Mandapam today. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that India's mobility sector will play a crucial role in taking India to the level of becoming a developed nation by the year 2047. The Indian Prime Minister also exuded confidence at the prospect of his third term.
साल 2014 के पहले 10 सालों में भारत में 12 करोड़ के आसपास गाड़ियों की बिक्री हुई थी, जबकि 2014 के बाद से देश में 21 करोड़ से ज्यादा गाड़ियों की बिक्री हो चुकी है। 10 साल पहले भारत में साल भर में 2000 तक इलेक्ट्रिक गाड़ियां बिक रही थी, वहीं अब भारत में करीब 12 लाख इलेक्ट्रिक गाड़ियां हर साल बिक रही हैं। पिछले 10 साल में पैसेंजर व्हीकल्स की बिक्री में 60% की वृद्धि हुई है। भारत में टू व्हीलर सेल्स भी 70% से ज्यादा बढ़ी है। अभी कल ही जो आंकड़े आए हैं वो बताते हैं कि जनवरी के महीने में कारों की बिक्री ने अपने पिछले सारे रिकॉर्ड तोड़ दिए हैं।
Bharat Mobility Global Expo 2024 showcases India's capabilities across the entire mobility and automotive value chains. DD India's Dibyendu Mondal takes us through the pavilions at the Bharat Mobility Global Expo 2024.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi just a short while back launched the Bharat Mobility Expo, the first ever a kind of an expo which showcases technology, modern technologies that involves in the mobility and automotive sector. We are at a pavilion which showcases the cars from across different companies, not just Indian companies, but also companies from across the globe that are using cutting-edge new technologies that are being implemented in their vehicles that could soon be seen rolling out in India. Behind me, you can see these are some of the new and modern age transport vehicles. We can see a truck by Tata Motors. We can also see some of the electric vehicles and public transport mobility vehicles that are displayed here at the Bharat Mandapam here in New Delhi. Not just this, in this expo, there are more than 50 odd countries that are participating to showcase their technology. Also, we have more than 29, in fact, all the 29 states from across India participating here to showcase different parts that are involved in the manufacturing of a vehicle. What we see behind me is just the complete vehicle, but not just this. This Auto Expo, in fact, the Mobility Expo also showcases different parts that are involved in the manufacturing. As the Prime Minister also said, for every individual to come and watch, to experience what this expo is all about, because this expo, this Bharat Mobility Expo showcases India's growth path, India's trajectory to growth, and how India is evolving and changing and adapting to new sustainable energy, sustainable form of mobility in the coming future. With camera person Ashish, this is Dibyendu Mondal from New Delhi for DD India.
Still with Asia, North Korea fired multiple cruise missiles off its west coast on Friday, marking the fourth time in just over a week that Pyongyang launched such missiles off both coasts. North Korea has said since last week it had tested strategic cruise missiles, implying that they may be designed to carry nuclear warheads. South Korea's military said the North appeared to be testing the missiles to upgrade their capabilities. And now we take a look at other stories making news around the world. Protesting farmers on their tractors blocked the border between Belgium and the Netherlands on Friday. The farmers blocked several border crossings between their countries as they continued to prevent trucks entering or leaving the port of Zeebrugge. The port handles car imports and some fresh produce from the United Kingdom and elsewhere. A mouse-sized video store goes on sale in the streets of the city of Malmö in Sweden, showcasing one of the latest works by Annie Mouse. These artists started building miniature installations for mice in 2016 and are known for their ankle-height miniature arts that have been installed in many such pop-up shops and restaurants in cities across the world. At least 3 people were killed and more than 300 injured in a massive fire when a truck laden with gas exploded in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. The explosion ignited a huge ball of fire that spread widely on Friday. The fire engulfed a nearby textile and garment warehouse while damaging several vehicles and commercial residential properties, the government said. India's President Draupadi Murmu inaugurated the 37th Surajkund International Crafts Mela 2024 in Faridabad in the northern state of Haryana. The fair showcases the richness and diversity of Indian handicrafts, handlooms and the cultural heritage of the country. Around 50 countries will participate in the fair, including Ethiopia, Kenya, Nepal, Russia, Sri Lanka, among others. So those visuals coming from the Surajkund Mela in India's Faridabad. With that, it's a wrap in this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram at DD India Live. I am Tanvi Taneja from my entire team in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.